Please welcome to the stage Sam Graham-Felson, Ronnie Cho, Sean Eldridge, and Lori Lodes.
Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay. My name is Sam Graham-Felson. This is actually my third Campus Progress. I was at the very first Campus Progress when Bill Clinton was the keynote speaker, and I was at the second Campus Progress when Barack Obama was the keynote speaker. And in fact, it was that conference and watching Barack Obama talk to young people that inspired me to eventually go and work on his campaign. So, I was the chief blogger on the 2008 campaign. Now I'm a writer and a consultant. And I'm going to go around and introduce the other panelists, but I also want to let you know that we expect you guys to get involved and tweet your questions to hashtag CPNC12. I'm going to ask a few questions, but I want you guys to really get in the mix and ask questions yourself. So we'll start with Lori. Lori Lodes is the Vice President for Communications at Campus Progress and Director...
Center for American Progress.
Sorry, Center for American Progress, and Director of the must-read Think Progress War Room blog. Prior to joining CAP, Lori served as the SCIU Deputy Communications Director, overseeing communications for their political, issue advocacy, and government relations work. She's had a ton of campaign experience. In addition to working on numerous local, statewide, and national campaigns, Lori served as political director for the Progressive Accountability Project during the 2008 presidential campaign. Lori graduated from the University of Oklahoma. Any Okies in the house? All right. And received her JD from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. Thanks, Lori. Sean Eldridge is an investor and a political activist. He's the president of Hudson River Ventures, a small business investment fund focused on the Hudson Valley, and a senior advisor to Freedom to Marry. He is also the founder of Protect Our Democracy, a campaign finance reform advocacy group. Sean joined Freedom to Marry in 2010, serving initially as communications director and then as political director, a role in which he was instrumental in winning the Freedom to Marry in New York. As spokesperson for Freedom to Marry, he has made the case for marriage in numerous media outlets, including Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. And finally, Ronnie Cho is the White House liaison to Young Americans. Prior to joining the White House, he was editor at the Newsweek Daily Beast Company in New York City, where he wrote and edited content related to social justice, innovation, and social entrepreneurship. Ronnie has worked on several political and issue campaigns, including Senator John Kerry's 2004 presidential campaign, former Arizona Governor Janet Napolitano's 2006 gubernatorial race, and most recently on the Obama for America campaign, beginning in Iowa in 2007, which is where we met. You guys might recognize Ronnie as the superstar of the HBO documentary By the People, the election of Barack Obama. I was in that for about a split second, but Ronnie was the star. And Ronnie graduated from Arizona State University.
Yes.
A lot of love
Your
for
people
Arizona
right
State.
Up front.
So I just want to start out by asking each of you guys what inspired you to get involved in politics and eventually led you to be up on the stage talking about your involvement in politics. Why don't we start with Lori?
I loved politics from the moment, I really think from the moment I was born. I came out and I was like reading the newspaper every day. But it really was, like, I remember in junior high debating my friends about politics. They did not care. They did not want to be debating me about politics, and I just would not stop. And I got involved in campaigns, and that's really what made a difference for me. I started volunteering as soon as I could. Before I could vote, I was organizing in my high school around the presidential election, given nobody else in my high school could vote either, but I was still wanting to get involved. And then when I went on to college, I got more involved. I started volunteering. I started working on campaigns at every level, from state senator to gubernatorial to senator, handing out flyers at Oklahoma football games, to just doing whatever I could, even getting involved in state government or the school government. So it really was just getting involved. And once you get that taste, right? I mean, for those of you who worked on campaigns, many of you I'm sure you have and are here, and that's why you're here today. If you get that bug, you just, you are committed to it. And so I think it was just that first taste of it, and then I could not let it go.
Cool. Sean?
So
I started very local. When I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and my first sort of political entree was to join the Community Relations Board for the city of Toledo. And I think I joined that because I liked to debate, I liked politics, I liked the big ideas and big questions. And sort of as my career grew, I think the reason that I've stayed so involved in politics is really a question of scale. If you care about the big issues facing this country, if you care about healthcare and education and infrastructure and all of the problems and challenges that we're going to have to face, you can work on them in small ways and you can work on them in big ways. And you can work at a nonprofit and really help people one-on-one and have an impact in their lives. But for me, if we're going to be honest about tackling these problems in the biggest way, at the scale that's going to be necessary to get things done, it really does come down to government. It really does come down to what our state governments are doing, what our federal government is doing. Obviously, I got involved in the marriage equality fight, and that was the question of the role that the government was going to play in people's lives. So for me, the scale of that is exciting. It's necessary. Whether our Tea Party friends like the role of government or not, it's here to stay. And I think that getting involved and making sure that it's playing the role in our lives that we want it to play is one of the most exciting things that you can spend your time on.
The reason why I got into politics really had nothing to do with politics at all. Being a first-generation Korean American, my parents came here from South Korea and having very little growing up. We were very poor. But we were still so grateful to be in this country. There was no sort of resentment or bitterness of our lot in life. We were just so thankful to have the opportunity to be in this country and to pursue whatever it is that we wanted to do. And that kind of informed so much of what I would end up doing for the next 20 plus years. It wasn't about, in this household, we vote for Democrats or we vote a certain way. It was driven by values, that we live in a community and everyone should do their fair share, get a fair shake, and hard work and responsibility are rewarded in this country. We should expand that opportunity. I wanted to be a part of that expanded opportunity for other folks, other families that were just trying to get into the middle class like we were. And no one's ever going to mistake me for a genius or some sort of brilliant savant in any way, but what I could do was work hard, and I was going to work hard to pursue that effort, whether it was electing the right people in office, advocating for the right policies, or being a part of organizations that did those things.
Great. Ronnie, I actually want to start with you. White House Liaison to Young Americans. That's a pretty cool title, right?
Yeah.
And I also I also understand that you have the job that Kal Penn, a.k.a. Kumar, used to have in the White House. So anyway, I'm sure a lot of the folks in the crowd are wondering what it's like to work in the White House. How close to Aaron Sorkin's version is it? Can you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day work and the role that other young people play in the administration, what the hardest parts of the job are, what the most rewarding parts are?
Sure. So like Harold took over for Kumar, I guess, in this, in this stance. I would say that how close it is to the Aaron Sorkin version of The West Wing, it's almost exactly the same, except we're better looking, I think, than they see on TV. It's, one thing we like to say at the White House, where I like to say, because I'm a little cheesy, is that we work for the best clients on planet Earth. We work for the American people every single day. My job, the only reason why I'm there is to create opportunity, advance the president's agenda, to support the middle class. Every day is a gift. No matter what you do at the White House, you're only going to be there for a finite amount of time. Nobody's there forever. So every day you have is an opportunity and a challenge to get through the grind. I mean, every single day we fight all kinds of stuff in the news and people pushing back on opportunity, trying to create opportunity, expand opportunity in this country for folks in the middle class and those trying to get there. That stuff is pretty heavy. Where I come from, people don't work at the White House. I didn't know anybody who worked in the White House or really into politics. And so I sort of carry that with me with all the folks from where I came from and folks all over the country that have the same story that I do, have the same values, that it's sort of a responsibility for me to make the most of this time.
And are young people in their 20s and early 30s, do they actually have a real role in decisions and important things in the White House?
Yes, absolutely. I think for those of you who've been in the White House, raise your hand. Some of you came to some of our briefing bowls. Yeah. Well, if you walk around the White House, look, the entire White House is run by 20-somethings. At the very top, you have folks who are a bit older than us, but the policy folks, the folks who are advocating, the folks who are negotiating with members on the Hill and offices and agencies, they're all in their 20s and 30s. So not only are we at the table, we're we are the table. We are the negotiating table. So it's very much reflective of the values we have as a generation are imbued in everything that we do every day.
Great. So we've heard a little bit about what it's like being young in government, and I want to ask Lori, you worked on a lot of campaigns, and what it's like to be a young person working on a campaign. I'm sure many of you guys in the crowd have worked on a campaign in some capacity, but can you talk a little bit about specifically what it was like being a young woman in a traditionally male-dominated campaign world, what kind of experience you gained, and how opportunities are changing for women now working on campaigns?
Absolutely. Just think about our country, right? 51% of this country is women. When you look at Congress, that percentage of women who are actually representing us is 21%. That is huge disparity. And that continues, I mean, that sort of setup is what we see in campaigns a little bit less, what you see in progressive organizations even a little bit better. But the reality is there is so much farther we have to go. And so what is important is to get involved and stay involved. And sometimes it's going to be a little bit difficult. But the reality is we need more women at every level. We need more women in policy. We need more women doing communications and research and fundraising, online work especially. And what it means is actually getting involved. And sometimes that's a little bit difficult. But you have to volunteer on the campaigns and get your foot in the door somehow. And it means a lot of times going and knocking on doors. I know that was one of my first big campaign roles, was knocking on doors for 12 hours a day in 100-degree heat. But you just have to assert yourself. And I think that's one thing that women especially need to understand and need to appreciate, is that the only one fighting for you is going to be you. And so you really have to stand up and believe in yourself, because you are incredibly smart and incredibly talented, but you just have to push yourself to get out there and to do even more.
Absolutely. And I should point out, many of the highest level folks on Obama's reelect are women. Stephanie Cutter.
And even in the White House too now, right? You have Jen Palmieri helping in communications. And my organization, Center for American Progress, Neera Tanden, recently took over as president. There are very few organizations, and even, yes, she's awesome. You'll be hearing from her later today, but there's very few women that are at these leadership levels, this high level, but that's changing, right? Neera only became president 6 months ago, and it's going to continue to change, but it's going to take all of us, everybody in this room, to make sure it does.
Great. Sean, you've also worked on campaigns. You were active in Students for Barack Obama in 2008. But I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the sphere outside of electoral politics, and a little bit about young people getting involved in issue advocacy. This year, President Obama made history by declaring his support for same-sex marriage. You've been active in that movement. Can you talk a little bit about how far the movement for marriage equality has come, and the role that young people like you have played in that?
Sure. So young people from day one in the marriage equality movement have played a huge role. I think sort of the best sort of example of that was our victory a year ago in New York State, where we finally passed a marriage equality bill. And yes, it's very exciting. Thank you. And young people played a huge role in that. I mean, thousands of phone calls, thousands of canvassers, thousands of in-person meetings, and it was a really tremendous effort where young people were leading the charge. And they weren't just doing it themselves, they were pulling in their parents and their friends and their neighbors, and it made a huge difference. And so there was that really sort of substantive role that they played in the legislative campaign. But what I really think young people brought to the table that we didn't have before in New York, and we didn't have before across the country, and we finally have now, is a sense of impatience, is a sense of urgency. You know, people who are a little older than us have lived for decades and decades without marriage equality, without affordable health care, without the kinds of opportunities that we want everyone to have. And what we saw in New York was young people saying, you know what, we're coming of age. It's not okay for my sister or my friend or my neighbor to not be able to marry the person that they love. So there was this urgency and intensity and impatience that I think was tremendous. And I think if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for young people being at the table and saying, no, we're not waiting till next year, we're going to do this now, I think it could have taken a lot longer. And I really hope we start to bring that same impatience to other issues. You know, right now I'm working on campaign finance reform. That's going to be a tough issue. That's going to be a hard one. But we need to start working on it today. And we'll often hear from older people, things take time, politics is messy, wait your turn. Well, to some extent that is true. Things are difficult, it doesn't happen overnight. But it really is our impatience, our sense of justice, our urgency that's going to help us tackle these big problems now and not put them off another year and another year and another year.
Great, thanks. So we've already got some questions coming in. Remember, the hashtag is CPNC12, and part of getting involved in politics is speaking up, raising your voice, asking questions, so please fire away. One tweet, by the way, has pointed out the cool socks that Ronnie is wearing on stage. Go green. And there is a question for Ronnie from J. Zhao Morris, who says, where do you see the political visibility of young Asian Americans? I guess to rephrase, if I may, can you talk a little bit about the role young Asian Americans are playing in politics today?
That's a great question. I think one of the most interesting things that came out of the census was, Asian Americans are the fastest growing population in the country. And I think from where I grew up, politics is a tricky, I think, thing to get into as a family from an immigrant family. You sort of don't know where to plug in. We don't necessarily market the opportunities to be civically engaged to our immigrant population. I think that's starting to change with social media, the way that everyone is so much more connected than we have ever been before. That's one of the reasons why I'm so bullish about our generation across the board. I mean, there are things like you're able to connect with people. Barriers are brought down. My family talks about not knowing a same-sex couple their entire lives and not having a chance to interact with folks from different races or religions. Those things are not the barriers they once were. And now we can connect with folks of different backgrounds from across the country, and that, I think, breeds familiarity, that breeds a little bit more understanding and tolerance, and the ignorance and that sort of thing, it gets dispelled a bit more. That's happening at a much more rapid pace. So I think, along with all populations, all subsects of our country, that interconnectedness is really, I think, changing our social landscape in a big way.
Great. We have a question from John F. Rice that is not to anyone in particular, so feel free to jump in if you have anything to say on this. What do you think will engage youth in the political process who are feeling let down by our institutions and leaders? Good question. Sean, do you want to try to tackle that?
Thank you, Sam.
Easiest question to answer.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I would say, and a lot of this comes down to this election, and this election is going to be a turnout game. It's going to be, do we show up, are we going to show up again in the way that we did last time? And I think we need to, stop quibbling, as the president has said a number of times, about the small things, the small matters in this election that we keep talking about again and again and again. And I think what's going to get our friends and our neighbors and our parents to show up is not Romney's tax returns, as much as that is a fair thing to push. It's going to be climate change. It's going to be jobs. It's going to be infrastructure. It's going to be the real problems that we're not talking about, that we're not tackling, that we're not working on. So I would sort of turn the question on its head. Yes, it's frustrating that everything is not being done as quickly as we want. And yes, President Obama has had incredible accomplishments that we should tout and need to tout. But I think it's the stakes that are at play this year that are going to get people to show up. It's the kind of country that they want to live in after the election and that we want to live in for the decades to come that I think will get them to show up.
I think it's hard not to be cynical, right? I mean, it is. But the reality is, if we're going to change, if we want this world to be better, if we want to, keep moving forward on marriage equality, on the environment, on any issue, then your voices have to be a part of this conversation. So I realize, you can become jaded and be like, oh, it's just easier if I, don't do anything, because it is hard. And you are going to have your heart broken because things aren't going to go the way you really want them to be and the way they should. But it's up to you. I mean, if you don't get involved, the same people are going to continue making these decisions that you don't like. And so it's, if we want to change things, I mean, not to harken back to 2008, but we have to be the change. And that means getting involved and staying involved.
Well, to sort of follow up on that question, we are in new territory with the Citizens United case, and change seems harder and harder to come by. So we have a question from Corey Cause, specifically for Sean. He says, how can young people stand up to super PACs and wealthy interests that prevent campaign finance reform?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question, and I think it's leading to a lot of the feeling of helplessness. I mean, if you wake up every single morning and it's another $10 million there, another $100 million there, it's, the feeling is, what can I do about it? What can I do to make this better? I think there's sort of two parts to the question. One is, what can we do in this election? And that's show up and vote and just keep working and keep pushing, because we have the American people on our side with progressive values. We still, no matter how much money they throw in, we're going to be right on jobs. We're going to be right on infrastructure. We're going to be right on the economy. So we just have to keep our head down and keep working and keep pushing. On the question of super PACs, it's not an easy answer. What we're doing in New York State is trying to create a model of public matching funds, which New York City has had for a couple of decades, which elevates the grassroots donor, which makes the small donations matter more than these big donations. And I'm optimistic about it. I think we have a chance in the next year, because of Governor Cuomo's leadership, to take up a real campaign finance bill in New York, sort of like on marriage equality, that can then be a model for other states and a model for the country. So check out protectourdemocracy.com, check out the Twitter page, the Facebook page. There is stuff we can do. We're not going to fix Citizens United this year, but we need to grow the momentum behind reform. I think we can do it. I think we can do it in part because young people don't want to spend the next 5 decades waking up and reading more stories about super PACs, and it's a big problem that we're going to have to tackle.
Great. We have a question from Josa Montar for Ronnie. Ronnie Cho, will you marry me?
Well, I think I'm the only unmarried person on the stage here, so your odds are very good among the folks here.
Okay. As more questions come in, you guys can discuss that after the panel. For Lori, beyond the sphere of electoral politics, or anyone else, feel free to jump in. Can you talk a little bit about how young people are making a difference outside of political and issue campaigns? Specifically, I'm thinking about movements like Occupy and how young people are important to those kind of movements.
So I work for the Center for American Progress. We focus on policy. And about a year and a half ago, we were really trying to figure out how to talk about inequality, because we saw this growing gap, right, that we all know about, the 99%, the 1%. And so we were doing what we sometimes do. We do focus groups and polling, and we just couldn't figure out how to talk about it. The conversation going on at that time was around debt. It was around the deficit. Government was shutting down. And there was just no room for this conversation. We were wanting to talk about jobs. We were wanting to talk about infrastructure and trying to make a more fair and just society. And there wasn't that appetite. And then flash forward 2 months, and then a little thing called Occupy starts happening. And it flipped the conversation on its head. And please clap, it was amazing. And you saw, it wasn't just the power of what was happening in the streets, but how the ripple effect. The media was talking about it. We did a study on Think Progress where we looked at the media coverage 3 months before. It was all deficit, debt. And then during Occupy, and the conversation was about jobs. It was about how do we get young people jobs, good jobs. It was about how we make this society, you might not think Romney's taxes are very important, I do, because it is this basic idea of fairness that was not being talked about. And Occupy, being driven by young people, forced that conversation to happen in a way that anybody here at a think tank we couldn't do. And it was a truly amazing moment.
Great. Another fun tweet. I won't call you out personally, but somebody said Sean actually looks like Sam Seaborn. I would have to agree with that. Okay.
You do.
But they didn't propose. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of good questions coming in. We have a little over 10 minutes, so let's try to get through as many of these as possible. Let's see. For Sean, there was a specific question which I'm trying to find. Oh yeah, Freedom to Marry just pulled young conservatives onto its campaign. Any idea how to get them onto other issues? Anyone else feel free to jump into this.
How to get Republicans.
How to get young conservatives build across kind of partisan lines.
Yeah, well, I think, on all the big issues that we want to tackle, marriage equality being one of them, climate change, jobs, more fair tax system. I mean, we're not, given the structure of our government now, given the Senate and cloture and the need to work across the aisle, we're not going to get big things done just with Democrats and just with progressives. So Freedom to Marry has certainly made a concerted effort to work with Republicans. It's easier to work with young Republicans on marriage equality because they're actually with us, so that's important. But I think we need to be excited to be in this room and to be with our friends and people who share our values and who are progressive. But all the work is not going to happen in this room. And all of us went to college and high school and grew up with people who aren't progressive, who are conservatives and who are Republicans. And we have to keep those relationships. We have to not just read the editorials and the writers who agree with us. We need to not just talk to people who agree with us, because ultimately the change we're going to make is, one, by electing people who agree with us, but two, by working across the aisle and building those difficult coalitions. And in New York on marriage equality, we had to get a handful of Republicans to vote for us. And that was daunting, and that was difficult. And we got it because of those personal relationships. We got it because one of those state senators went home every night, and his daughter looked at him across the table and said, "Really, Dad? Really? You're not there yet?" And it's those conversations that are sometimes difficult that we have to keep having.
And I'll add, one of the things President Obama talks about when he came out in favor of marriage equality was that as he's traveling across the country, meeting with students, young Democrats, young Republicans, sort of everybody, he would meet with some young conservatives, and they would say, "Mr. President, respectfully, I loathe virtually everything that you're working on and everything you're advocating for, but I'm with you on marriage equality. Now let's get back to jobs, let's get back to taxes, all that kind of stuff." That, I think, for him, and I think for a lot of us in this room, rings true. We have friends on both sides of the aisle that, because as a generation, we believe in sort of this equality. We believe in fairness. And we do stand on the shoulders of the civil rights pioneers before us. But the values, especially when it comes to marriage equality, when it comes to women's rights, a lot of these things, this is a generational shift that we are really, I think it's exciting to be a part of, and only further sort of emphasizes the need to break down the silos, the barriers of the politics, and really get down to what we believe as a generation.
Great. There are a few questions about how people got their jobs, or job advice questions. One person specifically wants to know how you get to be White House Youth Liaison, and feel free to answer that. But I'm actually, I think another interesting question was, is it better to, if you want to work on campaigns, to work on a local or a statewide or a national campaign if you're just getting in and trying to get your feet wet? So a lot of you guys have worked on campaigns. What do you say to that?
So I'll just start very, very quickly. I started literally, I walked into a party headquarters back in Phoenix. Didn't know anything about politics, but that was what I decided I was going to do. I was going to work hard for folks who were, supporting working class, middle class folks, just licking envelopes, making phone calls, doing all that stuff. I've done that essentially for the next 15 years of my life, was really just doing the grunt work. It's not sexy, it's not easy, but it's what change, that's how change comes from. It's doing that, building relationships, building a good reputation. Again, I think what's great about campaigns in many ways, it's a true meritocracy in ways that I think we don't really see so much these days, that if you work hard, you can get places. That's the only reason why someone like myself, lived in a car for the first year of his life, very poor. Within one generation, I can stand here and say I work on behalf of the President of the United States as his liaison to young Americans. That's what this country is about. That is what this president is fighting for. As he says himself, only in this country is this story even possible, and I feel that's the same way for me. And there are millions of other people who deserve the same opportunity that I have been afforded, and President Obama has been afforded and worked so hard for. So keep your head down, work hard, look right, smell good. All those things are very important.
And jump in here really quick, because what he's saying is so unbelievably important. It sounds, work hard. No, but really, work hard, because that is going to make the difference. Don't get caught up in the drama and the office politics or whatever is going on. You do your job, be on team, get it done, and people will recognize that. My first job after law school, my first campaign job after law school really, was knocking on doors. I had just graduated from law school, and I was like, no, I want to be involved. It was a labor campaign. Labor is extremely important to me, and I cared about workers' rights. And I was like, I don't care that I'm not at this level. I'm the lowest person on the totem pole, but I'm going to work my tail off. And it paid off, right? I mean, I only did that for a few weeks because they promoted me, but that's the point, right? If you work hard, you will be noticed, and it will be appreciated, and you will move further.
So I have to jump into the advice game. You'll hear this a lot, but one of the advantages of being young is that you can take risks. And I think that you can do that because as you get a little bit older, as you get married, as you build a family, you tend to put roots down and you tend to build a community around yourself. And that's a great thing. That's one of the best things about getting older. But it makes it a little harder to take risks geographically and career-wise. And so one of the best things I ever did as I was coming of age was live in a lot of different cities, live in the Bay Area and Boston and Chicago, and decide eventually that New York was the best place for me. And try that out, because how else are you going to know where you want to settle and where you want to be and where you want to spend your life? And I say the same thing applies for work. Try out a campaign, work at a nonprofit, try a policy job, because when you're young and you don't necessarily have a family to support, et cetera, it's a little easier to take those risks and to figure out what you really want to do. And the other side of it, I'd say, is, how do you figure out the specific role for you? And I think the way that I look at this, and it's served me very well, is to sort of do three things. One, say, what are the most important issues in the world that you think need to be tackled? And sort of put those in your mind. The second is, where are the gaps? What is not being worked on? Because one of the issues you care about, there might be 1,000 people working on it. And on the other issue, there might be 2. And they need some help. And they need you to join them. And the third is, what are you good at? You might be a great online organizer. You might be great at policy. You might be great in communications. And you really, I think, need to balance those 3 things to find what could be an incredibly fulfilling role for you. But it's not necessarily just the issue that you think is most important, because it might be covered. And there's a lot of other issues out there that aren't covered. And you need to balance that with your own unique skills and your own background that you can bring to the table. And for me, that's worked very well.
And I can just throw my advice out there as well. Some people ask me, how did I get to become Obama's blogger? When I was trying to get that job, I didn't say, can you hire me to be Obama's blogger? I said literally verbatim, probably shouldn't swear on stage, but I said, I will work my ass off and do whatever is necessary to help Obama become president. And basically, that is the kind of attitude that you have to have when you're starting out in politics. That you will be kind of a utility player. You will fill in holes where they exist, and you will work as hard as possible. We have a lot of great questions. We're not going to get to all of them. I encourage the panelists to tweet back to folks after. One of the last questions I want to ask, probably the last question, comes from. Now I lost your Twitter handle, but the question was basically, can you talk a little bit about offline organizing and relationship-based organizing versus social media organizing? And obviously a lot of young people out there, when they think of activism today, are thinking about social media. So final thoughts on how young people can make a difference with social media, or maybe it's not enough just to be active online.
So quickly, I'll just say, we worked on the Obama campaign in 2008, and there's a bit of a mystery around and some mysticism around, well, they just had a great Facebook and Twitter, and that's how we won the election. That's not true, not necessarily true. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's a tool in the tool belt. Online organizing, great. It casts a wide net. It gave us different leads of folks who may be able to support us and help us out. But it really came down to going door to door, having that face-to-face conversation, building relationship, building trust. Look, I was a carpetbagger from Phoenix, Arizona, coming to Des Moines, Iowa. They didn't know who I was. I didn't know who they were. But over the course of 10 months, we cultivated a relationship, trust, that at the end of the day, they said, you know what, I may not agree with every single thing Senator Barack Obama stands for, but damn it, Ronnie Cho, I respect you, I trust you, we've built a relationship, and if you say this is the man, this is the candidate for me, then it is for me. That kind of stuff is powerful.
I think piggybacking on that, you want to create an online campaign that creates offline action. So in many cases, you eventually want them to vote, or you want them to show up at that event, or you want them to go and canvass. And so you want, it's not either or. You want to build up that army of people figure out what they want to do, figure out how they can be used, and then get them away from the computer and get them to show up at an event and get them to go out and vote. And they will, as long as you're listening to them, as long as you're having that back and forth.
Social media has completely changed the way I do my job. It's completely changed the nature of campaigns. We are now dealing with a moment-by-moment news cycle, right? Thanks to Twitter, thanks to Facebook. But you're only speaking to so many people, and the reality is, it's what Ronnie said, you have to get out there and meet people where they are and establish those relationships. So I would encourage everyone, get involved, make your opinions known on Twitter and Facebook, but then also get outside of that and go talk to real people, because that's how you're actually going to change and vote.
Absolutely. A lot of times I get asked the question, having been someone who worked on this mystical internet team for Obama, what's the hottest new tool, for the next campaign, for the campaign of the future? What's the next Twitter or YouTube? And I always tell them that the hottest new tool for the future is actually the oldest tool in human history. It's the human voice. It's always going to come back to having face-to-face conversation. And social media is doing a tremendous job pushing people to have more conversations, connecting them with more people. But at the end of the day, nothing will ever be more powerful than that face-to-face contact. Anyway, thanks so much to all the panelists, and please continue to ask them questions, and we'll shoot back. Thanks a lot.